You read about this conflict, you watch it on the news, and then you stand here on Ukrainian soil and you see it firsthand. What is that experience like for you?
Well, look, I believe America is the leader of the free world. But coming here just as a private citizen, being able to really see firsthand the heroism of the Ukrainian soldiers holding the line in those woods, see the heroism of the people here in Irpin that held back the Russian army, to see families whose homes were literally shelled in the midst of an unconscionable and unprovoked Russian invasion just steels my resolve to do my part, to continue to call for strong American support for our Ukrainian friends and allies. I mean, they've retaken 60% of the territory that the Russian military took on that invasion now a year ago, February. But the fight is far from over, and you see the heartbreaking losses that have taken place here. And frankly, that you see not just war, but war crimes, like we saw in Bucha. Literally over 500 men, women, and children gunned down in the streets. For me, there's no substitute for being here, just to make sure the people of Ukraine know that we are with them. We're going to continue to stand with them, and to be able to carry this message back to the American people.
You and I, we've spoken in gaggles. We've sat down together formally. I've sat down with other candidates, but this is not like an interview we've done before. This is not like a campaign stop that I've been on and ever. And you're the first candidate. You're the first presidential candidate in this race to visit this country. For others who will inevitably be asked about this conflict, who will be talking about it on the campaign trail, what message do you want to convey to your peers in the Republican Party, to your peers on the campaign trail, about what you're witnessing here right now?
Oh, beyond the human loss and the heartbreak that we've seen from this unprovoked Russian invasion, my message to the American people is simply that it's vitally important that America continue to lead on the world stage. I mean, that we stand up to the kind of naked aggression that we've seen here. I truly do believe that by giving the Ukrainian military the resources that we have over the last year and a half to push back on this Russian invasion, that the West has really shown its strength. The American people have shown our commitment to freedom. Look, the war here in Ukraine is not our war, but freedom is our fight. And by standing with the courageous people of Ukraine, as they not only fight back but ultimately repel this Russian invasion, I think we're advancing not only the interest of freedom, but let me be clear, my other message is that we're advancing our national interest. I mean, the reality is that Russia, other than during the 4 years of our administration, Russia has attempted to redraw international lines by force. The antidote to that is American strength and American leadership on the world stage. And for my part, I'm going to continue to be a voice for that leadership because I truly do believe that by giving the Ukrainian military the resources they need to continue to drive back the Russian military, to reclaim their sovereignty, will not only send a message about unprovoked aggression in the world to the Russians, but will send a very clear message to countries like China as they contemplate their own military ambitions across the Asia Pacific. When the free world stands together, we can achieve peace in the world. And I believe, seeing what I've seen here today, I'm even more resolved than ever to be that voice for American leadership.
To that point, Mr. Vice President, I say this respectfully, but you're known as a fairly stoic individual. Oftentimes you deliver your talking points and you're very good at it. I saw you there, though, talking to those people, seeing what you saw, getting emotional. Tell me from your heart what you just witnessed.
Dasha, what the American people deserve to know is that this was an unprovoked act of Russian aggression against a civilian population. When they came here to Irpin, they started literally shelling and dropping missiles on private homes and apartment buildings like this one. They literally gunned down men, women, and children in the streets of Bucha, and left them on the streets to be collected by their neighbors, who, when they came out to collect them, were shot themselves. I mean, this just simply isn't a dispute between nations. Listen to what you're saying
out loud, the words that are coming out of your mouth, and what that means.
This just isn't a dispute between nations. This is an act of naked aggression by Vladimir Putin and a Russian military that's engaged in war crimes here. And I think it's absolutely essential that we give the Ukrainian military the resources they need to repel the Russian invasion and reclaim their sovereignty. But it's going to be just as important that we hold all those accountable for the war crimes that have been that occurred here on the streets of Ukraine, and that we've heard from people who witnessed them firsthand.
Well, let me ask you this. I've been following all of the candidates on the campaign trail. There is a lot of talk in the Republican Party about the sanctity of life, about protecting children. I mean, when you come here, it does not get more serious than that. We're talking about civilians, women, children, elderly. We're talking about children getting kidnapped. And yet, sir, you are somewhat unique in your party right now. There are a lot of folks, there's a big segment of the Republican Party that is not supportive of U.S. involvement in this war. Many of your rivals in the campaign have said so themselves. Standing here, looking at this, having witnessed what you have, what do you think is going on with the Republican Party? Are you surprised that there's not more support for this? And why do you think that this isn't, that your position is not the majority position, but rather the minority right now?
Well, I believe it is the majority of Americans and the majority of Republicans who understand that we're the leader of the free world, we're the arsenal of democracy. When we see acts of naked aggression by authoritarian regimes, ever since the days of Ronald Reagan, the American people have always stood with those who fought back to defend their own freedom. We actually called it the Reagan Doctrine. The idea that if you were willing to fight the communists back in the day in your country, we'll give you the means to fight them there, so that we don't ever have to fight them on our soil. It's part of and parcel of what brought down the Soviet Union and made it possible for Ukraine to live in freedom to begin with. But I do believe that the majority of Republicans and the majority of Americans still hold to that cause of freedom. But frankly, I think there's waning confidence in our current commander-in-chief. I think that the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan undermined public confidence. And the lack of a coherent explanation of what our national interest is here. Look, we've invested here in the Ukrainian military, and in less than a year and a half, Russia's gone from being the second most powerful military in the world to being the second most powerful military in Ukraine. And the Ukrainian military has fought back and fought back hard, and I believe that represents real progress for us. The American people deserve to know that it is in our national interest to give the Ukrainian military the resources they need to repel this Russian invasion, because anybody that thinks that Vladimir Putin, who authorized the kind of mindless violence that we've witnessed the aftermath of here on the streets of Ukraine, anyone that thinks that he would stop at Ukraine if he overran this country, I think has another thing coming. And the truth is, it wouldn't be long before he crossed the border when the men and women who wear the uniform of the United States would be required to make the fight. So I'm determined to carry that message to my party and all across this country, that we ought to continue to give the Ukrainian military the means to be able to fight and repel this Russian invasion. It's not only in the interest of freedom broadly, but it's in our national interest.
So respectfully, I don't see that the data bears out that the majority of the party is in support of U.S. involvement. I mean, an NBC News poll just came out showing that Republican voters are less likely to support a candidate who wants to send funding to Ukraine. You have former President Trump, who has praised Putin. You have Florida Governor Ron DeSantis was called this a territorial dispute. He's, of course, walked that back. And you have Kevin McCarthy, who just recently voted down and said no on legislation that would give more aid to Ukraine. There is a clear and stark divide on this issue in the Republican Party, when I think, 5-10 years ago, that wouldn't have been the case. So the Reagan era, the Reagan doctrine that you're talking about, do you still recognize that within the Republican Party? What do you think is going on, that there is such a division on this issue that for you seems to be very clear?
Well, first off, this is bigger than politics. Let's be clear about that.
But politics has an impact.
I really do believe that if Vladimir Putin and the Russian military were able to overrun Ukraine, it wouldn't be too long before they crossed a border where our men and women in uniform would be required to go and fight. And frankly, the second half of the 21st century could look an awful lot more like the first half of the 20th century. I think we stand with the Ukrainian military here, give them what they need, and so it's so much more important than politics. But I got to tell you, I've been traveling around this country since I left office 2 years ago. The American people believe in freedom. The American people believe our nation, rightly, is the leader of the free world. And I think this is simply a moment that calls for leadership. And it's one of the reasons that I'm running. I really believe that now more than ever, our nation needs leaders that will speak plainly with the American people about the challenges that we face around the world and at home, and brings real, clear leadership built on our timeless principles to bear.
Last question.
Speaking of that NBC News poll, again, the majority of Republican voters are less likely to support a candidate that is in support of funding for Ukraine. So this is not likely to be a campaign stop, so to speak, that is particularly fruitful for you with the GOP voters you're trying to court. So why are you here?
I'm here because it's important that the American people understand the progress that we've made and how support for the Ukrainian military has been in our national interest. I truly do believe that now more than ever we need leaders in our country who will articulate the importance of American leadership in the world. I mean, honestly, ever since we left office, it seems like the world's become more dangerous by the day. And for my part, I'm always going to step forward and speak the truth to the American people. We'll let the polls and the politics take care of themselves, but for me it was important to be here, to better understand what the people of Ukraine have endured, the mindless violence that was perpetrated on them in an unprovoked invasion by the Russian military, and the progress that they've made in pushing back that military. It's steeled my resolve, and it's made me better equipped to be able to go home as I speak to the American people about the vital importance of American support to repel Russian aggression. And when the Ukrainian military drives Russia off their soil and reclaims their sovereignty, I think we'll send a deafening message to China and other countries that might be considering military aggression as a means of expanding their interests. Well, I believe they are. I believe the American people love freedom, and they know that while the war here in Ukraine is not our war, freedom is our fight, and that it has been the great tradition of our nation to stand with those who are fighting for their freedom, and I believe the American people always will.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.